This past weekend, an interesting report came out from two well-known insiders, Tom Pelissero and Ian Rappaport. These guys are respected in the sports world, so when they say something, people listen. In their report, they said they aren't 100% sure if Micah Parsons and Max Crosby will stay with their current teams. They even mentioned that Myles Garrett might not be the only big-name player on the move. At first, this idea seemed unbelievable. Why would the Raiders trade Max Crosby? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there might be some truth to it. Could Max Crosby actually be traded? Is this really possible? The report also pointed out that both the Dallas Cowboys and the Las Vegas Raiders have new coaching staffs. With these changes and big contract extensions coming up, the futures of Parsons and Crosby are uncertain. For the Raiders, especially, this is a whole new era, and they might be open to big moves, including trading Crosby. Now, let's be clear, Max Crosby is not just any player. He's a superstar. If the Raiders do decide to trade him, they won't just get a mid-round draft pick. We're talking about multiple first-round picks because Crosby is a major asset. Personally, I don't think trading him makes sense. He's one of the best at his position, and losing him would be a huge blow to the team. But in the NFL, anything can happen. Max Crosby plays a premium position. Top pass rushers like him are rare. He's easily one of the best 3 or 4 in the league, and he might even be the best run defender at his position. That's why this situation is so interesting. Crosby has hinted several times that he wants a new contract. He's mentioned it on his own podcast and on a few others, probably 3 or 4 times now. While he hasn't publicly demanded a trade like Myles Garrett, that doesn't mean things won't change. At some point, Crosby could say, "I'm not playing this season without a new deal." And honestly, he has every right to ask for one. Looking at his contract, there's flexibility for both sides. If the Raiders wanted to move on from him today, they could release him with just a $10.2 million cap hit. That's a small price considering Crosby's talent. Right now, he's making an average of $23.5 million per year, which is a lot less than other top pass rushers. For example, Nick Bosa is making around $34 million, and once Myles Garrett gets traded, his new team will probably pay him around $36 to $37 million. Eventually, Micah Parsons will sign his new deal, and Crosby will have to get another contract too. If the Raiders are smart, they'll lock him in now while his price is still between $31 to $35 million. Because if they wait, it's only going to get more expensive. If the Raiders give Max Crosby a new contract now, it'll be cheaper than waiting until after Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons sign their deals. That's why this report is so interesting. I never thought Crosby would leave the Raiders, but he's made it clear that he wants a new deal. And if the Raiders' decision-makers, like John Spytek and Pete Carroll, see him as more valuable in trade assets than on the roster, they might actually consider moving him. Now, don't get me wrong, I think trading Crosby would be a huge mistake. He's a great player, and replacing him wouldn't be easy. Sure, the Raiders have guys like Tyree Wilson, Clavon Chaisson, and Malcolm Kuntz, but none of them are at Crosby's level. Still, I understand why Crosby wants a new contract, and I can see why insiders like Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero believe he could be traded. Micah Parsons' situation with the Cowboys makes a little more sense. The Cowboys have already handed out big contracts to CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and Trayvon Diggs. Even their offensive lineman Zach Martin is making $18 million a year. Plus, their second-string receiver, Brandon Cooks, is getting paid well, and they've got safeties and linebackers taking up cap space. With all that money tied up, Parsons could be the odd man out. As for Crosby, the trade talk has really taken off within the Raiders fan base. That's partly because of another big report. Apparently, the Tennessee Titans might be willing to trade the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Both Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport have said there's a real chance the Titans could move that pick. So now the question is, if the Raiders want to trade up for a top quarterback, could Max Crosby be part of that deal? Could the Raiders trade up and grab a top quarterback in this draft? Maybe. The Tennessee Titans might not even want a quarterback with the first overall pick. That actually makes sense. Some teams might not see this year's quarterbacks as worth a top selection. But all it takes is one team willing to trade up, while the Titans decide they'd rather move back and take the best player available instead. The Titans' general manager even said publicly that they're not locked into picking a quarterback. He made it clear they're going to draft the best player in the class, not necessarily a quarterback. Some people say Cam Ward is the best quarterback available, but he's not a better overall player than guys like Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. And honestly, I agree. Quarterbacks are important, but that doesn't mean they're always the best option. So if the Titans decide they'd rather trade back, and another team is willing to give up multiple first-round picks, it makes perfect sense for them to make that move. But here's where things get interesting. Some Raiders fans are suggesting that the team should package Max Crosby and the 6th overall pick to move up to number 1. Now, let's think about that. Trading up for a quarterback means you're going all in, believing you can win a Super Bowl in the next 4 to 5 years. But trading Crosby in the process? That would be a huge loss. He's one of the best players on the team. Giving him up just to move up in the draft could actually make the team worse. To me, that trade just wouldn't make sense. Some people think the Raiders should trade multiple first-round picks, a couple of second-rounders, and even a third-round pick to move up in the draft. But honestly, that's just too much. Look at what teams like the Philadelphia Eagles have done with their defensive line. They've built it through the draft, finding talent in later rounds. Milton Williams, a third-round pick, had 2 sacks in the Super Bowl. Josh Sweat, a fourth-round pick, had 3 sacks. Jalix Hunt, a rookie who wasn't even a high pick, got 1.5 sacks in the big game. The Eagles keep finding these guys, and it works. That's why the best move for the Raiders is to focus on the trenches, offensive line and defensive line. Draft young, talented linemen instead of spending $15 million on veterans like Adam Butler. Keep refreshing the roster through the draft. I always say this. Positions like tight end, wide receiver, or cornerback are risky picks outside of the top 2 or 3 prospects. If you don't get the very best, you might end up with a player who doesn't fit your system. Some guys thrive under certain coaches, but struggle elsewhere. But offensive and defensive linemen, they work in any system. Scheme doesn't matter as much for them. That's why, if I'm the Raiders, I'm using my first, second, and third-round picks to get the best linemen available. The Eagles have proven that building strong trenches can win Super Bowls. They've been to 3 and won 2 in the past 7 or 8 years. So, if I'm running the Raiders, I'm keeping my draft picks and keeping Max Crosby. When it's time to pick at number 6, I take the best player available. If that's a quarterback like Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders and they can win, great, take them. If not, grab the best wide receiver, defensive end, or cornerback on the board. Just keep adding talent and getting better. The Raiders need to keep building their team, especially in the trenches. Eventually, they'll be good enough to draft their next franchise quarterback. When that moment comes, they have to go for it. In the past, the team has passed on drafting a quarterback, and that can't keep happening. I ran a poll on Twitter asking fans, if the Raiders can't get a rookie quarterback in this draft, what's the best option for 2025? The choices were 1. Sign Sam Darnold for $35 million per year, 3-year deal. 2. 1-year deal with Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. 3. Go with a bridge QB like Jacoby Brissett or Justin Fields while drafting a young quarterback to develop 4th. Start Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew and not draft a QB at all. The majority of fans picked Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson on a 1-year deal, and honestly, I agree. That's the smartest move. The Raiders have a solid roster, and adding a veteran quarterback for a year could help them win now. Imagine this. The Raiders use the 6th overall pick to draft Travis Hunter, a dynamic playmaker. They sign Aaron Rodgers for 1 season. In the 2nd round, they draft the best available guard to strengthen the offensive line. If DJ Glaze develops well at right tackle and they find a solid running back, either in free agency or through the draft, like the Buccaneers did with Rachaad White in the 4th round, this offense could be dangerous. And on defense, bring back key players like Jonathan Hankins, Marcus Epps, and Adam Butler. Keep Max Crosby happy with a new contract. If this unit stays healthy, the Raiders could be a real playoff contender. A team with Aaron Rodgers, Travis Hunter, a strong O-line, and a solid defense. That's a team that can win games, and honestly, this might be the best way forward for the Raiders. In yesterday's video, I talked about how the Raiders' defensive line isn't that different from the Eagles. If you remember, early last season, the D-line was dominating games. Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins were tearing through offensive lines. Even though Jonathan Hankins' co. wasn't there at the time, the Raiders' defense was still making a huge impact. If this unit stays healthy and plays with the same intensity this season, watch out for the Raiders. They could be a serious threat. Now, let's talk about Sam Darnold. Some fans in the poll like the idea of signing him for $35 million per year, but I have to back off that idea. Sure, he looked better last year with the Minnesota Vikings, but is he worth that much money? Spending $35 million a year on Darnold is a huge risk. Can he actually lead the team to a Super Bowl? We don't know. He played well last year, but that doesn't guarantee success with the Raiders. Now, there's a chance that Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll could develop Darnold the way Geno Smith was developed in Seattle. And honestly, Darnold might even be more talented than Geno Smith. If the Raiders believe in their coaching staff, maybe they take that gamble. But here's the problem. If you pay Darnold $35 million, you're losing key players. Jonathan Hankins, too, is gone. Marcus Epps is gone. The team would likely miss out on other important players, too. That's a big price to pay for a quarterback who might not even be the long-term answer. However, if the Raiders do sign Darnold, they'd still have the 6th overall pick in the draft. They could use it to strengthen the defense, maybe pick James Pierce Jr. or Abdul Carter. They could grab an elite defensive end to pair with Max Crosby. And don't forget, they already have Christian Wilkins locked in. So, while Darnold could be an option, the Raiders need to think carefully before committing that kind of money. There are a few interesting quarterback options for the Raiders. Some fans like the idea of Jacoby Brissett or Justin Fields as a bridge quarterback, while also drafting a rookie quarterback. The team could take a quarterback with the 6th overall pick, but that might not be the best move. If I had to rank the options, this one would probably be 3rd on my list. Right now, I still think Sam Darnold is a slightly better option, but my top choice would be Aaron Rodgers, and if that's not possible, then Russell Wilson. Now, here's a name that might surprise you: Joshua Dobbs. I know a lot of people don't take him seriously, but hear me out. He's only 27 years old, and he's never really had a full chance to be a starting quarterback. Think about Geno Smith. Everyone used to call him one of the worst QBs in the NFL, but then he turned his career around. The same thing happened with Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. They struggled, then found success with the right team and system. Could Joshua Dobbs do the same? Maybe. I've talked to people who actually believe Dobbs could be a solid starter if he gets the right coaching and the right system. So, while he's not my first choice, I wouldn't completely rule him out either. So, could Joshua Dobbs actually be a solid starter? Maybe. It wouldn't shock me if, at some point, Dobbs gets a real shot as a starting QB. Now, let's talk about the least popular quarterback option in my poll: Aidan O'Connell and Gardner Minshew as full-time starters. Out of 3,000 votes, only 7.9% of people wanted this, less than 300 votes. That's pretty low, and I get why. To be honest, Aidan O'Connell just isn't a starting caliber quarterback. He doesn't have the ability to create plays when things break down. Look at Patrick Mahomes. Even he struggled against the Eagles' defense, and Mahomes can move. Now imagine a quarterback who can't run at all. That's a disaster waiting to happen. Sure, not every team has a defense like the Eagles, but if you want to win a Super Bowl, you need a quarterback who can handle pressure. Some fans have even suggested bringing back Derek Carr. Now, I'm not 100% against it, but I'm also not a huge fan of that idea. If you're going to bring in an older quarterback, he better be a proven winner. Someone like Aaron Rodgers, who's won big playoff games and a Super Bowl. Otherwise, it's better to go younger and get a quarterback with long-term upside. Someone like Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, or Justin Fields. What the Raiders should not do. Sign aging QBs like Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, or Ryan Tannehill. These guys are past their prime and haven't proven they can win big games. You either want a Super Bowl winner or a young QB with potential. Don't get stuck in the middle. So, what do you think? Drop a comment, leave a like, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.